Hi, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate you being here because I know you could do other things, but the fact that you stopped by to watch me, I appreciate it. So before we get started, would you do me a favor, subscribe and hit the post notification bell if you haven't already. And whatever you do, please give me a thumbs up so the algorithm can push my videos out there, and share if you like. I appreciate you. So today we're going to look at a party to remember. And we're in Daniel chapter 5. All right, we're in Daniel chapter 5. And I want to give you a little background because the king that is in charge right now is actually the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. His father, I think his name was Nabonidus, was someplace else and decided to stay where he was and left his son in charge of Babylon while he was staying in another palace elsewhere. All right. So just remember the things that have happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He's dead and gone by now. And remember the statue of chapter 2. If you haven't watched that video, go back and watch it. And then, of course, we listened to the testimony of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 4 when he had a dream again, and it was about a tree, and it was about his kingdom being cut down but being restored for a season. All right, so all of these things would have been historical facts that everyone in Babylon would have known this history, especially the royal court. So it's going to be interesting when we read together chapter 5, some of the comments that are made by the grandson. But you just know it is a choice. People can make choices all the time, whether to believe or not to believe. And we're going to see this in this chapter. All right. And we'll talk about it as we progress. All right. So let's get started. We're in Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. So Belshazzar is the one that is in charge at this time. He's the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. He's king over Babylon right now. Verse 2. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father, they call him father, but he's grandfather, his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink thereof. Now, here's a significant thing. Remember when, at the beginning of chapter 1, when Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem and overtook the city and took all the princes and lords of the royal family and put them under his charge in training. When he did that, remember, it was a test of the gods. Whose God is mightier? And so he goes into the sanctuary of the Most High, and he takes out the vessels that was used in the sanctuary. Now, this young man, in his disrespect, he says, this is not good enough that I'm drinking wine out of my chalices and my golden. Go and get those things that my father Nebuchadnezzar took from Israel, and let's drink out of those. Can you imagine? Verse 3. It says they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver and brass and of iron and of wood and of stone. Now, these are things that are made in this world, and they're going to worship this. But it sounds familiar. People worship gold and silver today. They love hanging it around their neck. They love hanging it off their ears. They love gold. So they're worshiping it the same way, but they're making a point to worship these elements right now. Verse 5. And then the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Wait a minute. Fingers and hands appear in the air and start to write. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosened, and his knees smote one against another. Wait a minute. They drunk right now. They as high as can be, so they don't know what's going on. But the king, his face has changed. He's like, what in the world is going on? Am I high or what am I seeing? And it says the joints were loosened. That means his knees were wobbly and he couldn't stand. His knees were smoting against one another. He was seriously troubled. Verse 7. The king cried aloud to bring the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever readeth this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed in scarlet, which is red, and have a chain, gold, about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. All right, remember I told you that Belshazzar is really under his father Nabonidus. Nabonidus is someplace else. I forget what kingdom he was at. He set a palace. He liked where he was. He wanted to stay there, and he left his son in charge over Babylon. So that's why he can only offer a third position, because his daddy is still the head chief. He's ruler over everything. Belshazzar, I should say, is under him. So he's going to give this position to the person who can interpret the dream, which would put him third ruler in Babylon. All right, let's continue. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known the king the interpretation thereof. Are you surprised? He hasn't learned anything. I'm sure his father told him what happened to his grandfather. I'm sure even if he was a child, he knew because he was in the royal courts. But these guys still cannot do this. Then was the king Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet. Now she wasn't there, so I'm thinking this might not have been his wife. It might have been his mother. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in the kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, thy king, the king, I say, thy father made master of the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. So the queen mother is saying, listen, there's a man in your court that was around when your grandfather was alive. Then when these guys couldn't do it, there was a spirit in him that could do it. So you need to call him. Verse 12. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation of the dream. Queen Mother's got it right. She's like, she's the one sober-minded person. She must have heard somebody in the royal palace must have went to her and told her what was going on in the banquet hall and what had transpired, and everybody's drunk, this partying in there, and now this hand has showed up, has put this writing on the wall, and she hears what her son or grandson or son, I don't know who it was, but I'm thinking it might be her son, is saying, and so she comes to the rescue. Okay, now Daniel comes in, verse 13. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee. So he's heard of him. So that means he heard of the stories behind what he can do. That the spirit of the gods is in thee, and the light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read the writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not show me the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed in scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and thou shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. So he's still making this promise to Daniel, because these other guys can't fulfill his answer. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be unto thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. Wait, I want to pause right here, because Daniel is older now. He's even more wise, because he's now has more of the Spirit of God upon him, and he's sure in his devotion to the Most High Yah. And he's like, look, keep your gifts. I don't want your money. Okay, give that to somebody else, but I'll do what I'm here working for you to do. I will read the writing and give you the interpretation. He is, I love how secure he is in his walk with God. O thou king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, a majesty, and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he would slew, and whom he would keep alive. So he would kill him or keep him alive. He had charge over everybody, is what it's saying. And whom he would set up, and whom he would put down. So he's just saying, but God, the Most High Yah, has given Nebuchadnezzar all of this power, and he's using it and abusing it. But this is what it is. Verse 20. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. So I know this boy had to know this story about his grandfather, because this was his condition for how many? 7 years. Okay. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses, and they fed him with the grass of oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High Yah ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he willeth. I don't think these rulers have come to realize this, because, we're not under a theocracy now, but they will know who the Most High Yah is very soon. Trust me. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled thine heart. Okay, now you're doing like your grandfather. You haven't learned from him. Though thou knowest all of this. So Daniel knows that Belshazzar knew what happened to his grandfather. He knew about the statue and the image dream. He knew about the golden image that his grandfather built. He knew that the 3 Hebrews had been thrown into the fiery furnace and came out alive. He knew about the dream of the tree, and the tree being cut down, and his grandfather being out in the field like a beast with the beast. He knew all this. Daniel knows that he knows this. So even though he's acting like he don't know, he don't call Daniel. He calls his magicians, the people he he didn't want that guy. This guy is a Judean. He don't want to hear from him, but he has to call him because his grandmother or his mother made him realize that that's who he needed to call. Verse 23. But hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of the house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver, gold, brass, iron, and wood and stone, which seeth not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, have thou not glorified. Have mercy. He said, listen, you in here worshiping Inanimate objects, gold, silver, wood, stone, that have no eyes, have no breath, and yet the God of heaven that has given you the breath that you breathe, and you're not glorifying him? Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. So he's saying the hand that came, that you see writing on the wall, has come from the Most High Yah. Verse 25. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Meaning, God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, the kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. All right, we're in the second part of the statue. I want you to go back to chapter 2 if you didn't already. See the video of Daniel chapter 2. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold. Gold was the most valuable. He was a strong, mighty kingdom, okay, the kingdom of gold. But there was a kingdom that was going to come that was going to be, that was going to succeed him, that was less, not as strong, not as valuable, but still strong. But it took two, because it was the Medes and the Persians. So the two arms, it took those two nations together to overthrow Babylon. Verse 29. Then commanded Belshazzar that they clothe Daniel in scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So the next person we're going to see that takes over the world kingdom will be the Medes and the Persians. The Median was Darius at this time. He was 62 years old. Belshazzar was killed. The story goes that while they were partying, remember I told you how thick the walls were? Well, there was a river, the Euphrates River ran through the city of Babylon. So they had flowing water. I mean, you imagine, it was probably the coolest thing. But what the Medes and the Persians did, we don't know how long this took, but it took some time. But they were partying and off guard, and the gates were left open or not guarded as well as they should have been. And what they did was they redirected the river and dammed it up so he and his army could march in under the walls into the city. And they were able to overthrow the drunken king and all his lords and guards and wives and concubines. And Darius took over the kingdom. What lesson can we learn from this? We always have to be on guard and watch. We cannot put our trust in some trust in horses, some in walls, some in chariots and all of their things. But guess what? There's one mightier than you that can come and take over what you have. You know, sometimes people in troublous times, they don't want to leave their houses when hurricanes and storms, as if their presence is going to stop what is happening so they can guard their possessions, because they worship their things so much that even they risk their own lives to the detriment of their own souls. But here we're learning that the Most High Yah is in control. He sets up kings, he takes down kings, okay? And even though things might look like they're in a bad situation, it doesn't matter. He's still got everything under control. You must remember that, okay? So this young man learned a lesson that he didn't get to live out because he lost his life. But the story goes that that night, Babylon was overtaken, and now a new kingdom is being set up. But just know, at the end of this story, I don't know if we'll be able to go into 7 through the end of this chapter, because it's not enough. I don't know if it's enough for me just to read it to you, because there's so many parts to it that you probably need illustration. I don't know. We'll see how God leads, but I don't know if I'll be able to do that just talking to you like this, if you'll understand it. But it's an exciting story, because at the end of the story, Rome continues to the end of time. The iron and clay continue to the toes until the stone comes and God sets up his kingdom. But it's in a different phase than we know it. And we're at that place right now. Okay. We're in that situation right now. And even though it's about to come to an end, just let me say that. But okay, I'm not going to give any more away. And we're going to stop right here. And until we meet again, may the grace and peace of God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Shalom.